Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Irsyadul Fikri. My student number is 45. In this video, we would like to show you about our discussion. Our discussion includes presentations about definition, characteristics, example, and the reason why they emerge about cultural dimension. Also, the presentation includes analysis of Korean pre-teaching and also Australian pre-teaching. The group consists of 4 people. That is myself as Dicky Fikri, and then Novita Zami, and then Indah Wijayanti, and also Tiara, Restine, Aulia. The first material will be delivered by my friends.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Novita Zami. In this occasion, I would like to explain the material about brief overview of 6 cultural dimensions according Hofstede. The first is power distance. Power distance, according to Hofstede, is a level of charge or acceptance of an unbalanced power between people. The characteristic can be seen from this culture occurs when there is a perception of other people who are considered superior to others. Power distance can be divided into 2 groups. First is high power distance, which is a condition where power is the basis. Second, low power distance, which tends to see the similarities between people and then is more focused on the status achieved than the carried by someone. Second is uncertainty avoidance, a cultural dimension that shows the nature of society in dealing with an unstructured, unclear, and unpredictable cultural environment. Society can circumvent with uncertainty with technology, law, and religion. Uncertainty avoidance can be divided into 2 groups. There is weak uncertainty avoidance, which is they have high tolerance for dealing with uncertainty, and second is strong uncertainty, that is low tolerance. And then the third is individualism and collectivism. In the concept individualism, where the surrounding community focuses more on socializing into a group, the characteristic is they are more concerned with themselves and their immediate family. Society emphasizes the word I rather than us, unlike individualism. In a country that has collectivism thinking, the people don't only think about their own group, but are also more able to socialize with other groups. And then masculinity and femininity. Masculinity and femininity are related to the value of gender differences that exist in society. Masculinity is very concerned with success, while femininity is very concerned with relationship between people. The characteristic can be seen from the point of view of masculinity society is the people that describes more male characteristics, while femininity society is the people that describes more male characteristics. So the point of view, not from sex. And then long-term and short-term orientation. Related to the choice of focus for people's efforts, the future or the present and past. The characteristic of the long-term orientation dimensions is dominant for each individual who can adapt to a tradition that is always changing and depending on the surrounding condition, while the short-term orientation is more individuals who do not keep with the times. And then indulgence and restraint. Indulgence is defined as a society that provides freedom to express desires and feelings, especially those related to pleasure, friendship, shopping, consumption, and also sex. The opposite of indulgence is restraint, where people can feel free to enjoy their life because They are bound by rules such as custom, religion, of course. For our society, religion is an important matter that cannot be ignored. I think that's all about brief overview the material.
My name is Indah Wijayanti, and now I would like to explain the examples of cultural dimensional. Okay, first is power distance. The examples of low power distance is calling instructor by their first name. There is informality and also humor in class. Meanwhile, the high power distance is the people revering the instructor by title only. The example is in Indonesia, which is revering the instructor by Pak or Bu or Pak Guru or Ibu Guru, and they revert to waiting for the instructor to take initiative if problem occurs, and also avoiding sharing one's own opinion in class. And then move on to uncertainty avoidance. In Indonesia, there is a strong preference toward the Javanese culture of separation of internal self from external self. When a person is upset in Indonesia, it is habitual for the Indonesian not to show negative emotion or anger externally. They will keep smiling and be polite no matter how angry they are. This also means that maintaining workplace and relationship harmony is very important in Indonesia, and no one wishes to be transmitter of bad or negative news or feedback. Move to individualism and collectivism. We can take an example in the classroom. Students who value individualism may be motivated to share personal opinions and to stand out or to be a leader among their peers. Meanwhile, the student who value collectivism may be hesitant to be participate in ways that cause them to stand out among their peers or may feel obligated to help struggling peers. Next is masculinity and femininity. In Indonesia, there is a status and visible symbols of success, and that is important, but it's not always material gain that brings motivations, but often it is the positions that person hold which is more important to them. Because of an Indonesia, that concept called gengsi, or loosely translated to be outward appearances. It is important that the gengsi be strongly maintained, thereby projecting a different outward appearance aimed at impressing and creating the aura of status. So Indonesia is working to produce a status. Meanwhile, in feminine countries, they mostly focus on working in order to live. For examples, managers strive for consensus, people value equality, solidarity, and quality in their working lives. Conflicts are resolved by compromise and negotiations, and incentives such as free time and flexibility are preferred, and focus is on well-being, and status is not shown as the examples of Indonesia. An effective manager is supportive one, and decision-making is achieved through involvement. Move to the long-term and short-term orientation. For example, in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, they have a culture of high profit thinking. Long-term orientation cultures thinks about their old age and retirements when they are no longer productive. So it can be seen that they are very persistent and work hard in finding future savings. Meanwhile, the short-term people, they adhere the short-term orientations are the people who have a culture of thinking for the past and the present, when they place a great importance on tradition and maintain image, and consume or spend more than savings. The examples like Canada and New Zealand, which are concerned with the current welfare and make the most existing resources for the present while there is one. But the followers of the short-term orientations culture will maintain their tradition. Next is indulgence and restraints. The examples of country of indulgence is USA, the example is like customer service representative visibly demonstrate their happiness with a smile and friendly demeanor. However, in restrained cultures such as Russia or Eastern European, this would be considered as inappropriate and unnatural. So that's all the material of examples of cultural dimension. We move to the next material.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Tiara Restine Aulia. I will talk about difficulties of Korean pre-service teachers teaching in US, a language barrier and the adjustment to a new culture and different culture and society. Difficulty in adapting to an English-speaking environment outside of Korea. Korean social studies pre-service teachers experience difficulty speaking in a foreign language and in adapting to different culture. The education system in Korean was different from in the US. Rather than taking a single judgmental approach to one type of education and accepting new teaching pedagogies injudiciously and unconditionally. These Korean pre-service teachers reflected on the advantage and disadvantage of each education system in Korea and in the US. They further endeavored to find a way to adopt new pedagogies and approach that might work in their local education system and for the student in their future teaching effort. And they had not anticipated that there would be so many students with just diverse background in a single classroom. They state that such a diverse students population in American classroom came as a big shock to them, since they had been barely exposed to similar cultural, racial, and ethnic difference in South Korea. And then analysis of the difficulties in terms of Hofstede culture's dimension. Korean pre-service teachers teaching in US. Collectivism. Collectivism expects individuals to make personal sacrifice for the well-being of the society. They can adapt to a new environment and they participated in the teaching and learning in the classroom. And then an avoidance ambiguity. They need a long time to accept a new culture. They will be able to accept the new culture, but it slowly and take a long time to them. And then they tend to cling to their own cultural. They really hold their own cultural. I think that's all. Thank you.
Next, we go to the next page. It is about figuring out difficulties of Australian pre-teaching teacher in Thailand. The article is about understanding the experiences of Australian pre-teaching teacher in Bangkok, Thailand. The complexity or difficulties emerge from cross-cultural dissonance of both perspectives, since the Australian and Thai do not share the same language or culture. Due to this, there will be two different languages in the classroom. Even though English is a compulsory subject in the Thai curriculum, according to Ministry of Education in Thailand 2008, that doesn't mean Thai students comfortable with the way of teaching by using English. But most importantly, Australian pre-teaching teachers do not have any kind of experience of teaching in different languages and culture, especially in Thailand. So we figured out what was the problem or difficulties that Australian pre-teaching teacher faced in teaching in Bangkok, Thailand. First, there is a language barrier for both countries. That is exactly Australian use English as their language, and also Thai use Thai as their language. And also they have different teaching strategies. Australian use student-centered learning, while the Thai use teacher-centered learning. And also because of these different languages and cultures, there's a lot of miscommunication going on. And also, as I mentioned before, even though English is compulsory subject in Thai curriculum, according to Ministry of Education in 2008, that doesn't mean Thai students comfortable with the way of teaching by using English all the time. The process of globalization era leads stigma of East-West cultural model. Complexity also derives from pre-service teachers from Western institution and cultures. Western teaching and learning methods most likely perceived as inductive, collaborative, or learner-centered or student-centered, as I mentioned before. And also, while Eastern is more adept about rote learning or teacher-centered approaches. Nevertheless, this leads both students and teachers approach to the classroom with their own culturally bound preconceptions, interpreting, thinking, and doing. We go to the next page, analyzing the difficulties in terms of Hofstede dimension of Australian pre-teaching teachers' difficulties. According what we have found in the problem that happened in the article, Australian in these terms is about power distance. Australian most likely have small power distance, while Thai have large distance. We can consider by seeing Australian do student-centered learning, as I mentioned before, and Thai do teacher-centered learning. These terms, why we say that Australian have small power distance, because of this. This is terms towards education. And then about uncertainty avoidance. Australian also have weak uncertain avoidance, while the Thai have strong UA. Since both countries have different learning strategies, Australian teacher may say, I don't know, because they are adapting student-centered learning, while in Thailand, the student prefer knowledge or education with what they taught by their teacher. And if the teacher-centered teacher-centered learning strategies, teachers should able to answer all kind of questions. And then we go to the next page. It's hard to analyze the individualism versus collectivism between Australian and Thai. But what we have found that is individualism is students are expected to learn, while collectivism is students are expected how to do. As mentioned in the article, one of the participants said that I wanted students to understand what I was teaching. That means they give it some learning strategies. Learning theories. That is, students are expected how to learn, right? Students are expected do what they want, while Thai students adapt Confucian traditional culture. Then Confucian traditional culture view proper human relationship as the basis of society, reflected to the Thai students. This is what we have found in the article so far about the problem, and also identification of analyzing the problem in the Hofstede culture dimension. I think that's all. Hopefully easy to understand. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.